Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join our coffee break today. As always, we'll be running through some content and sharing some information, but we always want this to be a really interactive session. So if you have questions or you want to expand on something that you heard, please don't hesitate to post in the Q&A section. I'll be monitoring that. Anyways, let's get started. So today our topic is disaster recovery and all of the terrible situations and scenarios that you don't want to think about happening to your business. But the good news is that with proper planning and preparation, your technology can be protected and ready to go should the unthinkable happen. So joining me today is Nick Bambulas. Nick is a VCIO and a team leader for the VCIO group. He's a strategic resource that we provide to all of our clients who are version 3.0 and higher. And he provides the guidance and advice for aligning a client's technology with their business goals. Our clients lean on him to help with budgeting, road mapping, and overall strategic planning. So Nick, thank you for joining me. And it's been a while since you joined a coffee break. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your history with the organization?
Sure. Thank you, Ellie. So I've been a VCIO at 11 Gordon Flesh for just about 8 years now. Before coming to the organization, I was in multiple different IT management roles. Spent most of my time before 11 in the aviation and hospitality industries, respectively. But now, in the role that I'm in today, I kind of utilize all of my years of knowledge and experience leading IT departments to help all of our small and medium-sized clients that are part of our version 3 and up managed services program to make sure that they're in line with best practices, that they have a technology advocate, and someone to help them with their plan. A lot of the small and medium-sized clients we work with don't have internal IT departments, let alone executive leadership that has technology background to advance their goals. So I kind of fill that void for our clients today.
Perfect. Well, let's get started. I know we try to keep these to about 20 minutes. So a first question is related to when budgets are tight, especially now during the pandemic. It's really easy to want to trim away costs that seem extra or unnecessary. And often backup and recovery, disaster recovery, can be one of those things that we just think we're immune to or that won't happen to us. So I was hoping you could start with a story of a client who has called into action their backup and disaster recovery plan. Can you tell me a story of an experience you've had?
I can. In fact, the story I'm going to share, it kind of shows two different scenarios. And this particular law firm had engaged in a very cost-effective backup solution that was cloud-based. And that was the only component of the backup solution. It was just cloud-based. And they unfortunately had an event where they had someone had let loose a crypto locker. They had taken the bait on a spam email, and all of their data was encrypted. Thankfully, it was all backed up securely, but the problem is they had all of it in a cloud-only backup. So they had to then download all of that data, a terabyte or two of data from the cloud to get their server back up and running. And that took them about a week. So not only did they have the virus to contend with, they were able to recover from backup, but because they kind of skimped on their backup strategy, only went the cloud route, they had to go through that long week of downtime, basically just at the mercy of their internet connection, waiting for files to download. And it was a long, painful process. That same law firm years later, after some investments in disaster recovery, had a second type of failure, except this one was a little bit easier to deal with. It was a failed component in their server, which took the server down. But they had changed their backup strategy to include not only the offsite component, but an on-site storage component as well that had the ability to bounce back from that type of outage. So when they occurred the second time, it took the IT team about an hour to get the system back up and running on the backup solution. Even though the dead server was still in play and not functioning, they were able to bounce back within an hour and be back to fully operational status. So they kind of learned the lesson the hard way the first time and made sure that they weren't going to go through that pain ever again, and invested in a proper disaster recovery solution that can respond quickly to catastrophes and outages.
Wonderful. And so important when you have really expensive billable resources like lawyers who are waiting for things to download, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we all know how much revenue walks out the door when, on an hourly basis. It's a pretty easy formula, right? You kind of do the math over the course of the year, and you can figure out how much it's roughly going to cost you to not function for a day or two. It can be pretty painful for a small, medium-sized business, for sure.
Sure. So how frequently are you seeing small and medium-sized businesses investing in these types of backup and disaster recovery? Is it common, or is it something that we're having to educate clients and prospects on?
I would say 5 years ago, we were doing a lot more education. I would say today it's much more mainstream. Some of that's driven by compliance standards or just personal experience, like the story I just shared. But increasingly, more and more small and medium-sized businesses are making good investments in a disaster recovery solution, because in today's day and age, nobody tolerates downtime. Your employees don't tolerate downtime. Your clients certainly don't tolerate downtime. I mean, look at all of us as consumers. If we walk into a local business and they say, sorry, we can't help you, our server's down, we're going to be very surprised, and we're probably going to go to their competitor next door. And it's just the age that we live in. We have to keep systems up and running, even if there is a catastrophe.
Yeah. So as we know, some businesses are required to have very documented and laid out backup and disaster recovery, due to compliance. Is there benefit to an organization who is not required due to compliance still have a plan and strategy in place?
Well, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if you have the plan and strategy in place, you have the investment in technology, you have that clear picture of how your organization is going to respond to a catastrophe or an outage. It is kind of like an insurance policy. You don't know if you're ever going to have to use it, but it's nice to know that it's there. And it gives you that peace of mind and allows owners and executives to sleep a little bit better at night. But one of the big things that I see as a VCIO, because again, I'm basically IT department head for small and medium-sized clients. So I help with a lot of different things, including insurance audit forms. So a lot of business insurance these days carries some sort of cybersecurity or cyber policy within that larger business policy. And increasingly, more and more insurance companies are asking very hard questions when they're renewing these policies. They're asking very specifically about backup and disaster recovery postures. They're looking for written policies and plans. They're also highly recommending clients to invest in security. And it's all driven by their rates. Those that don't check these boxes in the affirmative experience much higher rates from their business insurance these days, because the insurance companies are trying to evaluate risk. And if you can't answer these questions well, you're going to be a more risky client for them, and thus they're going to charge you more. And the rates continue to increase for those that are kind of behind the times in terms of backup and security services.
So they've become a little bit more sophisticated as they understand what it takes for a business to remain secure. So that's wonderful. Tell me, we've talked a little bit about cost, but we haven't actually talked about cost. What, on average, how much does it cost to have a good backup and disaster recovery system in place?
Well, it varies a little bit from organization to organization. The two big factors are how many servers do you have running and how much data you have to protect. Those are really the two driving forces in the cost of a backup solution. I'd say, the average small business that we're working with today has a couple of servers and maybe a terabyte or two of data to protect. And, that investment has definitely gotten cheaper over the years. But for us as a managed services provider, we provide those backup solutions as part of our monthly spend to our clients. In those categories, we're talking hundreds of dollars a month, maybe $200 to $300 a month to make that solution work for a company that's got a couple servers and a couple terabytes of data. Obviously, the costs go up the more servers they have, the more storage that you have to protect. But I'd say at an annualized cost, you're probably looking in the neighborhood of $3,000 a year for your average small business. Obviously, that changes with some of the dynamics that I mentioned.
Sure. So let's dive into kind of the guts of this plan and this strategy. When you are speaking with a client, what sort of business requirements do you come across most often related to what they want within their backup and disaster recovery plan?
Well, the first question I ask is, are they held to any compliance standards? Whether it's HIPAA, FINRA, SEC, or PCI compliance. Each of those standards has their own unique requirements. Granted, in the backup disaster recovery space, a lot of them overlap. A lot of them are very similar. That's the first question I usually ask is, are you held to any of those standards? Because we'll want to tailor the solution to that compliancy. If there is no compliance requirement, then really the big question is, how much downtime can your organization tolerate? So you've got these 3 servers that are doing various jobs for your organization, running line of business applications, running your accounting software, running your CRM or your ERP solution, storing all of your company files. How impactful is it for your organization to be down for X amount of time? And that's really the formula that most organizations have to ask themselves is, how much downtime can we tolerate? If these servers are offline, what doesn't function and what business does not get done because these other processes don't function? Most places would say, well, I really don't want to have any downtime. That's the ideal solution. But there are great tools out there these days to provide a high level of protection and recoverability. So not only protecting the data, but to be able to bounce back from a severe outage in a short amount of time so that your employees and your customers don't really feel the pain of the outage that you just experienced.
Perfect. So a lot of the time we talk about how many different solutions are out there, and there can really be this analysis paralysis. Someone is just so intimidated looking at all of the options and different brands or whatever when they're analyzing what they want to invest in. So how does an organization know what is the right fit for them, both from a cost standpoint and from like a flexibility of that tool?
Sure. And it's a tough question to ask because of the financial end of it. And if you're a newer organization or you have a very simplistic backup solution today that you want to improve, you talk to your insurance agent, they always tell you, well, buy as much insurance as you can afford, which is kind of a vague answer, right? But really what you want to do is evaluate the individual items of how much will downtime cost me, how fast do I want to recover from it? And that will help you just make decisions on what solution to look at. It's really important to align yourself with a good technology partner that has background on these disaster recovery solutions, because like you said, Ellie, there are tons of them out there. And there are some that are really, really, really cheap, really, really, really inexpensive, but they only do one little component of what is a larger pie of backup and disaster recovery. And salespeople are out there to sell products and make revenue for their organization, and they all tell really great stories. But it's really great to align yourself with a technology professional that can help you kind of weed out what's good and what's bad, and help you make an informed decision based on the needs of your organization.
Wonderful. So last question before we open it up to additional questions from our audience. What would be some of the first steps you would give someone who knows that they need backup and disaster recovery, but they're not quite sure where to start? What would be your advice to them?
My advice would be the very first step is to determine how much downtime you can tolerate. What that pain would be like if you're down for a day, what that pain would be like if you're down for 6 hours. And that's really the first place to start, is to figure out that formula. What is going to be impactful? What level of downtime is going to be impactful for your business? And then the next step is obviously aligning yourself with a great technology professional, like someone from Ellie, like our VCIO team, to help guide you through this landscape and help you make an informed decision.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Nick. As always, we are so honored that you have spent your time with us today, Nick, and also the people who are joining us in the audience. We always want to open the floor for questions. And so while we wait for questions to come in through the chat, I wanted to run through some other information, some housekeeping. Our September events are now live on our elevityit.com/events. Additionally, I have a on-demand session that I think will be really impactful for the people on our call today. We hosted a thought leadership webinar last month and want to make sure that you know that it's available to stream on demand. Microsoft announced their Azure Virtual Desktop, and we think it's going to be a big deal for a lot of our clients, especially with COVID and the Delta variant. People are still working remotely, but they still need the tools that make their day productive. So if this sounds interesting to you, please navigate to alevityit.com/AVD to access this free recorded session. Next up is our coffee card. So hopefully you've got your phone handy. Hold your camera up to the screen to take a photo of the QR code, or navigate to this URL to answer our quick survey and get entered for your coffee card. And again, I just want to thank you for your time today. And if you have any additional thoughts or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Nick or myself. I'll leave this screen up just to make sure everyone gets their chance to scan. Additionally, you'll be receiving an email with the recording of this session and both Nick and my emails. So wonderful. Thank you again, Nick, for your time. Enjoy your vacation. And I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Thank you, Ellie.